Hi, very nice to see you all. I'm Sigrid Dyekjær and I'm a producer and I'm actually tuning in from Denmark, from Copenhagen. And it's evening here. I know that you just watched the film and it's a very touching film, a very strong and powerful film. I have produced a film called The Cave that was running in the Academy run last year and was nominated for an Oscar. But other than that, I haven't produced a lot of films from these areas, and especially not films from war and conflict zones. So for me, it's an extremely touching film, and it's a very powerful film and a very important film. It's from an area in the world where I haven't been personally, and I think most of us haven't been able to go there and meet the local people there. So I'm just extremely grateful that Skye Fitzgerald had the courage and the braveness to go and do a film from this area. I know that's been a tough ride, and that's why we're here, and that's why we're going to do this Q&A today, so that you will actually get to understand what it really takes as a filmmaker to make films from these war-torn areas of the world. Today's Q&A, you're going to meet Fuad. He is from the north of Yemen. He is a fixer, and I think actually in the international field, you would call it like a field producer. But of course, of security reasons and to protect him, he is the fixer. We are going to talk with Fuad about what it's like in Yemen, of course, also now, but also he can talk on the behalf of our characters who actually weren't able to join us because of difficulties with the transactions and with the equipment and technology. But he will represent them. So thank you, Fuad, for joining us. You will also meet a very dear friend and very, very talented director, Talal Derki. He did a film called Return to Homes and Of Fathers of Sons that was Oscar nominated in 2019. And Talal is a great friend of Skye, and they have met each other when Skye actually did two of his first films in this trilogy, which this film is the last film in the trilogy. So thank you, Talal, for joining us. And we will, of course, ask you some questions along the way because you know a lot from this area. And Skye, I will, of course, introduce you to. You are the incredible, talented director and who has such a great courage and is so brave to go and do films in these very difficult and conflict zones. So thank you, Skye. And I'm going to start with asking you a couple of questions. This is the third film in your trilogy. And I have wondered, you know, from your two other films and then coming to this film in Yemen, you know, why did you want to do this film? What was your personal motivation? Maybe we can start with that question.
Yeah. Thank you, Sigrid, for that, and everyone else for coming along here today. I feel like I'm in the presence of heroes, so thanks for participating in this. You know, there's a simple answer to the question of why, for me at least, and that's that, you know, worldwide there's nearly 80 million refugees in 2020 worldwide, and many years ago I sort of set myself just a personal threshold for the kind of project that I wanted to engage in. And it was a simple question, you know, if I'm going to do a film and take the time and the resources and invest so much into creating a film, I want to make sure it's on a topic that I feel like the global community should be paying attention to. And the fact that nearly 1% of the world's population is currently displaced, I believe is something that we ought to be looking at, and those numbers are going the wrong direction. And so I decided to do a trilogy, and it started with 50 Feet from Syria, on the border between Syria and Turkey, where I worked with a colleague and a friend who's an orthopedic surgeon and documented his work. And then Lifeboat with a small INGO who was plucking asylum seekers and refugees out of the ocean in the Mediterranean, trying to cross the Mediterranean. And then in Yemen, yeah, and then in Yemen, of course, you know, hunger ward, where, you know, the situation is so dire, and especially in the West, I think we hear so little about it. I feel compelled to make sure that I do everything in my power as a filmmaker to at least raise awareness and hopefully also marshal resources and attention towards changing the dynamic on the ground. I guess the last thing I would say is that in each case, the approach that I try to take is on individuals, right? The intent is to take this huge scaled up problem, which is so hard to wrap your head around, 1% of the world's population. How do you make that palatable? How do you tell that story through individuals, right? So people can understand it on a human level. And that's been our approach in each film, is to go in very narrow and tell it through the stories of what I see as heroic individuals who are trying to simply save people's lives.
Great. Well, you know, what I found very striking about this film is, you know, very, very incredible characters. And these are women. And as I know from The Cave that I produced, that it's very hard, you know, to get so close to the women on ground and also get them to speak and feel comfortable. So, of course, I really want to ask, you know, how did you find these incredible women? And maybe Fuad should be the one answering that question, because I know, Fuad, that you are the local fixer on the ground and you made sure that there was an access to these places, but also an access to the characters. So maybe you can explain a little bit about that.
I choose the Makia, the doctors, because they are they live every day in a very bad condition. Especially they are receiving every day a lot of kids, and many kids are dying in the small centers or in a hospital. So this is well, some doctors will tell us that how people, especially the children in Yemen, how they die. They are dying every day.
Yeah, they can't save them. They don't have enough food to save them.
They just most of the doctors, if a lot of children, they get a lot of doctors, they receive a lot of children, and they are trying to save the children lives, but as you see in the film, a lot of children, they are starving. If the child is lucky and get out from the hospital, will go back home and then will be starving again and again because of the war.
Wow, I mean, I'm so happy that you found these characters for Skye, but Skye, maybe you can explain us, you know, so what happened, because you actually shot the film yourself and you shot with another cinematographer. You were 2 cinematographers on ground. And once you arrived to Yemen, then you, of course, also had to build a relationship with these main characters. So how did you maneuver that, and how did you get that work going?
Well, you know, we worked in both the north and the south. In the north, where Fuad lives, is the rebel-held Ansar Allah or Houthi-held area. And, you know, I just want to say for a moment how critical, Fuad, your work was, and continues to be for anyone who wants to work in the north with any sort of film. I mean, Fuad does this incredible thing where even in sort of an autocratic state, right? He's able to sort of maneuver and find ways to support people like Makia Maji very carefully, even under the strict oversight of Ansar Allah, right? Which allowed us to spend significant time with Makia, which never would have happened before. And Fuad was also just instrumental in all of the nuances of working in a conflict zone, right? I mean, we went through 25 checkpoints going from the south to the north, and Fuad met us at number 12 or 13, I think, right? And unless Fuad had done all that work with Ansar Allah beforehand, multiple times for weeks, we never would have gotten to the north, which is why so few stories are coming out, right? So I just want to honor that and say thank you again, Fuad, because you're one of my heroes, and I am completely in awe of the work that you have done, you did with us, and you continue to do with others.
Great. Well, you know, when you started working with the characters, Skye, you know, how was it to actually film these women? Were they just open to you, and were they, you know, allowing you to film every situation? And also, was it dangerous for them to participate in the film, or how did you manage to sort of get the film permissions in order to shoot there?
Yeah, the situation was very different with Makia and Fuad in the north than it was in the south. In the south, it's also a conflict zone, but it's much more. The danger in some ways is much greater because Ansar Allah has such control over the north. But in the south, it's really sort of the wild west of militias. And so depending on where you are, there's a different warlord or a different militia group that controls the area. So you have to be very careful. There's a lot of kidnappings for ransom. There are still pockets of Al-Qaeda in the south. So, you know, we, you know, because it's a conflict zone, there's a certain threshold of risk that you just have to be willing to take on, right? And so when we're outside of the clinics and the hospitals, it was one way of operating altogether, where we worked with Faraday bags and we traveled only by day. And, you know, we didn't use regular email accounts. And you know, even then, going through checkpoints, we were detained. We were held. And we were very, very fortunate to be held only for a short period of time. And it could have gone either way, frankly. And it does go the other direction sometimes. Adele, who was Fuad's counterpart in the south,
yes,
3 months ago, was detained because the filmmakers and journalists he was working with then didn't protect him sufficiently. And so he's currently in prison in the south of Yemen.
not because of this film, but because of another.
No, exactly right. No, we were very, very careful. And this is exactly why, you know, we have to operate so carefully in a place like Yemen, as Fuad, you know, because journalists get killed and they get detained. And what we're trying to do as a filmmaking team in these situations is sort of fill this space, right? Adele is a journalist and a filmmaker in the South, and he can't openly do his own stories all the time, or he will be detained in prison like he is now. And so we came in and collaborated very closely with him and Dr. Ada to try to help tell the sort of stories that they want the larger world to know, that they can't do themselves because of the danger inherent in the process for them because of the de facto authorities. So it's
but I mean,
very...
Yemen must not be very proud of this film. I mean, they must be, you know, upset about you guys making a film about this. So, you know, how was that for your characters? Were they in a safe space, or, you know, was it dangerous for them to participate, or how do you sort of made a secure room for them where they felt that they could speak the truth?
In the case of Dr. Aida, and I think Makia to some extent as well, you know, they are sort of the queens of their own domains within the medical facilities. Both Makia and Dr. Aida in the South are so well respected because they've been doing this really difficult work for so long, which is just fundamental to being a health practitioner. They're simply trying to save children's lives, and they've garnered an enormous amount of respect from all of the authorities in the country in both parts because of that. And so that's where our freedom came from, right? Is because they have such trust in their own communities, we could operate relatively openly within the walls of their facility, right? Even as sort of the war raged on outside of those walls. And that's how we mitigated risk to some extent as well, is we made sure that we sort of lived within their universe, which was perfect for highlighting this amazing work that they were doing.
Great. I just want to bring in Talal because, you know, you're sort of the expert as a film director from this region. You're from Syria and you've made incredible films on ground in Syria. And, you know of the problem when, you know, a state has been doing a war or has been in a war for so long that all the money has been spent on the war, and hunger and the populations are the one that are suffering because of this situation. So, you know, audiences have seen quite a lot of films from Syria. So we haven't seen that many films from Yemen. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what kind of parallels you see that this film has compared to the situation that you have been shining a light on from your films.
Hey, good evening. Skye, congratulations for this big film, and Fuad also as well, congratulations. Well done. Like it's really inspire and give a new vision about a new style, a new artistic, a new human at the same time. Filmmaker and team can be really, with a big passion, can bring a special moment, reflected the whole situation very simply without making interview, without go to the all this cliche information. I mean, Sigrid and Skye, I want to thank you also for really give this effort to make films in our region and to bring the voice of people who live their whole life unjust situation and endless suffering. Thank you, really. Thank you for all of this effort and these big films. This is the cinema where everything can remind forever, and the voice of a human will be remembered. The news didn't support. The news take the thing in two different campaigns, left and right, and people get less passionate watching the death and the sabotages of cities in the Middle East and in the Arab world with no solutions or not real understanding. So it's really again wondering me like how you, I mean, manage to do this, how you get, I mean, it's also a question after you finish a heavy difficult film, how you get the encourage the power to do the second and the third one again in the same adventure and the same risk. You take this in your shoulder and you go there for a place where really like I'm as an Arab or Syrian citizenship who know Yemen and know the language, still find hundreds of difficulties before I take decision that I should go there, I should try to make film, I should bring the voice of people, because both of us get inspired or connected somehow for difficult options in making films. So really it's a question, because from Syria, I mean, as you know, where with the place where you really, where people are suffering or get really in a dangerous situation, this is the area where it's surrounded by a lot of difficulties to get through it. It's like under the siege, those regions. And for a person who come from abroad, like should land in the other side where like some good situation and or a government or say, let's say a regime somewhere where there is an airport and you have to land there, and then you have to do a lot of steps until you reach the dangerous area where no one can know what's happened to you, or you disappeared, or you get kidnapped or killed. That is the most easy for anyone to be a target for a lot of those militia and bad guys and ISIS and bombing, of course, because you will be there where you are without any protection. So it's a really question how you manage, because Yemen, it's like an island. If you look at Saudi surrounded it from all the sides, and Yemen in the south, and the only it how to get there, how to find the patient to stay longer as the film is need. This is also a question when you do a film, you need more time. You know this, guy. It's not just like you go and cover and you jump left and right 1 week and then you finish, you make a long report. This kind of industry, it's really not easy to secure the result, not easy to promise anyone. I mean, of course, you have a family, you have a people behind, and you dare to do there and forget about all this love behind you and risk your life just to bring the voice of people you didn't met before. You never share their life before, and this is like, I can give you full respect for this. It's a good, like, when I'm watching Hunger World, it's rise a lot of things for us. It was also ambition that to be able to bring the topic, to bring a strong character with a beautiful image. What it was missing for me as a filmmaker there, that I can really bring the right people and the right crew where I really can film in things in a way that I would love to bring it as a visual result. And you did this clearly beautiful. The general shoot you did to the whole moments. It's really give that the editing also was also very strong. We add also the character Aida and Makia. They are really strong ladies. You look at their eyes, and their eyes tell everything. So they can inspire, as we said, a lot of female in the Arab world, that they should stand hard and stand strong, and forget all this man's and masculine's way of thinking about where should female appear or where should exist or where should not. They have to break the role. They have to protect their like the dignity and the life, and use their education and their experience to save lives. So that's the whole
That's
process
the
to see
hope
it in
from this region.
this is the hope. I mean, without, it's always, I mean, you never lose hope, but the point that Skye and Fuad were able to touch that point, to bring it in cinematic image, and to do all the process without like, what to say, big damage. Always, I
Yeah.
can tell you how many films, Secret, they were in process in similar area, and suddenly they couldn't be able to continue or to see the light because the filmmaker get killed, or the cameraman get arrested, or the character itself disappeared suddenly, and people don't, I mean, they lose the access, the way to get there, and the way to feel and to stay the time the cinema needed. And this time it's really like cooking very slowly, very, very slowly, to
Thank
get
you.
this
Thank you, Talal.
understanding. So congratulations.
Great points. I want to move to you, Skye, and ask you, because Talal is talking about the visual style and how you worked on that, and you were two cameramen, and you are also a cinematographer yourself. So could you explain us a bit? What type of rules did you have when you shot? Were there specific ways you were targeting the main characters and the scenes that you can tell us about?
Yeah, this because we tried to, from a security standpoint, to mitigate our risk once again by staying in the hospitals and the clinics, just how we achieved sort of doing what I would hope would be more of a cinematic experience rather than a newsreel, which is what often comes out of Yemen, right? A journalist gets in and they do a newsreel in the style of BBC. We wanted to do something else, something that would have some
We
legs.
could clearly hear that it worked with Talal. He definitely got that feeling, for sure.
Yeah, something something that hopefully would stand the test of time, right? That would be as relevant a year from now as it is now. And so I was deeply tied to verite scenes and coverage by necessity to some extent, but also because of the nature of the life and death stakes in the hospitals themselves. So, you know, several of the shots that we use in the film are close to 90 seconds long, uncut, because I really believe that by staying with a shot without an edit, it helps create an immersive experience, right? It helps create a sense that you're staying in the moment and you can watch it unfold in front of you if you don't edit it. I'm also a believer, so we have many shots like that where we just simply watch and observe, but I'm also a believer in sort of themes and visual metaphors. And so if someone says something during the course of working with them or during an interview that feels poetic or profound, that I begin to look for sort of visual representations of that idea as we're shooting. And so in Hunger Ward, for example, there's a moment, you know, we begin the film with an overhead shot of Sadaka Hospital in the south, right? As we sort of unpack a little bit of the context of the war. And it's a static framing. The frame doesn't alter. But then during the course of the film, you know, over and over again, we see the results of displacement by war. We see the results of war and conflict on civilian populations. And so I wanted to somehow represent that visually. And so I decided to close the film with basically the same overhead shot of the hospital, but reversed, where we're ascending instead of descending. But I also wanted the shot to visually represent sort of this sense of displacement, this sense of disorientation that the characters we've been with during the course of the film are experiencing themselves because of war and displacement. And so I decided to rotate the frame. So as the camera comes up, in order to try to mirror that sense of vertigo and displacement, we rotate the camera over the hospital as we depart. And so I'm always looking for ways to push the medium in that way, to try to sort of like reflect larger themes and metaphors.
Well, great. I just want to encourage the audience to, you know, you're welcome to write some questions and we will bring those questions into the talk. So don't be shy. You know, you have this incredible team of people, very experienced, and they can really answer some of your questions. Fuad, I want to bring you into the conversation as well, because you know, you're the person that is in Yemen right now. As we talk in this beautiful Q&A, you are actually with us, joining us from Yemen. So could you explain to us what is the situation now? I mean, we leave with the film this devastating situation, these incredible doctors, but you know, some sort of we don't see that the situation has changed or anything. So how is it on ground today? Is it the same situation, or where is Yemen today?
It's thank you. It's getting worse, actually. People, they think about outside of Yemen, they think about coronavirus. And in Yemen, if you if you'll not die from coronavirus, you will die from hunger. It's a lot of people. They lose their children every day, and we see that the situation on the ground, it's a very difficult, because people haven't received their salaries since 4 years, and they have nothing to feed their families. And some families, some fathers, they stop to bring their kids, or to stop schools, or because they have no income because of the war. And on other hand, we have the airstrikes. Airstrikes, it can hit anyone, and before, a lot of airstrikes hit a lot of people. So in this case,
today,
today, if I didn't see airstrike or if I didn't hear any strike, I see children starving, parents are thinking about food or thinking about how to feed their families. People just keep talking. We keep talking in between us. If I go out, I see in the street, I see people trying to get their incomes, because everything here, because of the war, everything, it's difficult to 90% of people they lost their jobs, and even people that are working with the government, they have no salaries, and every day we have children malnutrition, they are starving, and they are dying. If we go to the hospital, I meet someone, hi, why you are here? My kid. Maybe at 5, after a few hours, the doctors will come to tell the parents that, sorry, you lost your kid. Every day I see.
It's so sad. This is
This
so
is
sad.
what I see. This is what I see every day. If we didn't hear a strike, I see a lot of cases around me.
Wow. I mean,
Even
Skye,
when,
you know, I'm so happy you actually managed to do this film, because I think we see sometimes a little clip in the news, but we don't actually spend time watching the people and seeing what's going on. So, you know, if I can talk with you a little bit more about the filmmaking process, you know, after you had been shooting there, I guess you transported your material yourself to the US and started editing, and you know, how many hours of material did you actually have, and how did you sort of structure your editing?
Yeah, so the transporting of the material was tricky in the field. It's one of the great challenges of working again in a conflict zone like Yemen is, you know, power is always an issue, right? And so just getting the footage each day off the cards and then duplicate it onto drives was a challenge unto itself, because you never knew how much power you'd have, whether we'd have to go buy some more diesel for the generator to keep the laptop powered. So that was one challenge. And from a security standpoint, it was a whole nother question, because the south, the north of the country is very solidly under Houthi Ansar Allah control. And then the south is very closely monitored by Saudi Arabia and UAE, from a digital standpoint as well as a security standpoint. And so we had to be very careful about how we transported our footage. We hand carried it, cloned copies, but we also made sure that we retained a secure copy with a trusted individual as well, so that if anything happened to us, we'd have that copy to revert to as sort of a security protocol. And then when we returned to the US, strangely, you know, we left Yemen in February, and I took about a month just to sort of recover from the experience, and then just started going through all the footage, literally frame by frame, day by day. And I took an entire month just to review probably the 100 hours of footage maybe that we had, and made a 1,500 line spreadsheet of everything that we had. So I really knew as a director for the second creation what we had, what we actually had filmed. And that
you
was,
probably couldn't go back to do pickups, I guess. You know, you had to sort of get everything once you were there.
Yeah, and that's why we pivoted in the field so much. We had to be incredibly flexible in order to do a film like this. And so we really had to build it out of the best of what we had. And, you know, this is the kind of film where I think Talal and I chatted about this. You know, it's hard enough to film and to watch a child die before you, you know, which happened multiple times while we were filming. And it's a different experience to then watch it over and over again, right? As you go into the edit process. and make decisions, right? To make decisions about what you should include and what you shouldn't include. And so that sort of tension, you know, it's I think one of the tensions, Talal, that you deal with too probably is, you know, I never want to withhold the horror of war from an audience, because I deeply believe it's so critical that we show what's actually happening. As long as we have buy-in and trust and the go-ahead from the families and our collaborators to do so. At the same time, I think you have to be very careful about how you do it, right? I never want to have any shot or scene in any of my films that is gratuitous in any way, shape, or form. It has to be there for a reason, for impact, and with the permission of the family. And so, you know, as we went into the edit process, those were sort of the principles that we were working off of. And I think while it's probably a difficult film for many to watch, I also believe that the very power of the film lies in the fact that our collaborators trusted us and honored us to be in that room with them when their child died, and we didn't flinch. And I needed to keep that trust by not flinching during the post-production process either, and making sure that even if it's a difficult film to watch, it showed these important things that we need to know that are happening in Yemen right now, as Fuad just spoke so eloquently to.
I think you did it with a lot of respect. And, you know, as an audience, I actually felt that I was taken care of while watching that. But I'm curious, Talal, what you think, because, you know, you've also been in that situation multiple times to make a choice whether you should put those images in or not, and what are the thoughts from a film director perspective allowing that into your film?
I mean, when we talk about like editing process, and you are surrounded, you just finish a long experience, and you back one piece safe to your homeland and to the safe area where you can start prepare this to the audience. So in the editing, this is also kind of heavy legacy, can still on can affect your psychological situation and your like inner empire, that you have to watch again and again those difficult moments, and not only to live, they are still appear and appear and appear in the editing, and in every screening you going to follow the film. It's difficult, but always, like everyone, when I decide to make Return to Homs, what is in my mind is totally different when I decide to make a father and son. What I want to tell here is different what I want to tell there. So to bring this the story of this hospital and those encouraged ladies to the outward from Yemen, where it's almost forgotten country. Yemen since age, since like there were civil war, always there is a fight. It's never find the time for this rich culture to really participate in normal life and be part of the whole nation. They can, I mean, they're always a fight. They're all, and in the peacetime there is a dictatorship who really control the country with the iron hand. So bring the story from Yemen, and for you, Skye, it's always a question about what you want to show, and if it's really necessary to start your film with this difficult moments for kids and their mothers. I believe it was harsh for me, because I mean, personally, I traumatized, or I suffered a lot from this experience. I had more like a power to handle it. Now it's more difficult, and this is why I'm trying sometime to go for more different level of understanding the conflicts. What you did is very important, because really people don't know about Yemen. They don't know the situation. They don't know that they are really at this time where people suffer from corona and people start to feel insecure, even in the big capitals. So they look at this different kind of suffer, and it's you bring like the ruins, being alive in the ruins where nothing can be happened. There is no end for this war. So it's I like your choice. I like how to start, as I said in the edit, what you bring to make it in this way until the end. I believe you bring the conflicts of Yemen and the suffering of the people in very beautiful and understandable cinematic language.
You know, I want to put in a question that comes from the audience, because that's sort of in line with what you were saying, Talal. And one of the questions is, you know, if you can talk about, Skye, your decisions around ethical questions regarding what footage to include and what footage not to include, because I think that's equally important to discuss. You know, what were your decisions around that? Did you have the ethical decisions about that? Do we have you, Skye, with us? Skye, can you hear us?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm here now.
So did you hear the question, or do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah. No, I heard it. I think,
Okay.
you know, I think every edit in the film to some extent included that question, right? You know, I think the key foundation for me for answering that question in the edit is always trust, right? Because ultimately I believe that the process of making a film, a collaborative film, it comes down to trust between human beings, right? And in the first case, we never would have been in the room with Makia or with Aida or with those families unless there wasn't a certain foundation of trust. And that takes time. You know, you have to build that. And then after you're done with that phase, right, and you start to review everything, that trust has to continue, right? You know, you have to continue using those same principles when you go into the edit and ask yourself, right, would this be a gratuitous scene? Does this serve the larger narrative? Regardless of whether you have permission from the families to use it or not. And there certainly were instances where, you know, as we went through the clearing process in the hospitals, there were families who did not want to participate, and so we would not film them, you know? So we only came back really with footage with participants who wanted to engage and wanted their story to be told. But then there's that secondary set of questions, you know. One, there can be nothing gratuitous. Two, it has to serve the larger narrative of the film in some way. And hopefully by allowing some of the more visceral scenes, like grief. Like, I feel like grief is such an important, fundamental human emotion that at least we in the West here view in a very different way. And I think by embracing it and showing the grief of a mother who has just lost her child to starvation has an innate power. And I think that if we faced that more directly in the West, I think we would be better at that process. And I felt it was absolutely vital to show that process in the film, that here is simply a young woman who has lost her child. And I think by showing her level and depth of grief, it engenders empathy, right? It helps us understand.
We're going to move towards the ending because we are sort of running a bit out of time. And I just want to go for like a last question, and then you will run it off, Skye, and finish it off. But I just want to say thank you so much, Talal, for joining us. And Fuad, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Yemen. And, you know, your country is in our hearts. And one of the very important questions here in the end that Skye is going to answer is, you know, how does the producers want to use this film? And what can we as an audience do in order to help? That's one of the questions from the audience. And thank you so much. And Skye, please finish and let us know how we can help.
Yeah. So personally speaking, you know, I am one of the reasons that I wanted to do this film is because as an American, as a global citizen, I am just angry by the fact that a child can die of starvation in 2020 for lack of food, when we as a global community have the resources to prevent that, but not the will. And so my hope is that this film can be just a very small part of generating that will to end the conflict in Yemen, which we have the agency to do. You can go to our website at hungerward.org, and we have some tools for people to get engaged. One of them is it's a legislative tool if you live in the US to engage with different lawmakers that are active on this issue. We're pushing hard for an executive order from the incoming administration to end all operational support from the US to the war. And then you can donate directly to the clinics that we showcase in the film through a link through a nonprofit partner that we have listed there. So those are two direct ways that anyone can engage quite directly and tangibly with the project and the larger problem.